You don't understand God. I don't understand God. And that's a good thing. God tells us two things about himself in the scriptures. First of all, he says that his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his ways are higher than our ways. And that means he does things that we don't understand. And he thinks thoughts that we can't possibly think. The other thing he tells us about himself is when he gives us his name. In English, God's name most of the time either gets translated as Jehovah or Yahweh. And where that comes from is when he's talking to Moses out of the burning bush in Genesis, before Moses leads the Israelites out of captivity. Moses asked God, who should I say sent me? And Moses says, or God says to Moses, I am what I am, or I am who I am. And that phrase, I am, is where we get either Jehovah or Yahweh. Jehovah is a little more of a Latinized version of it, not like Latin as in Hispanic, as in Latin, the actual Latin language that nobody speaks anymore. And why God gives Moses this name is because there's nothing to describe God. There's no way for us to wrap our brains around an infinite God who is the creator of the universe and everything in it, all matter, all time, all space, created by him, that exists in three people, in three persons, but yet tells us that he is one God. We cannot understand God, so God tells us that he is what he is. He is who he is. And that's a good thing. Because if God has to fit in your boxes, if he has to be something that you can understand, then first of all, he's very limited. If you can understand God, then he's not much of a God. He's not very big. He's not very powerful. I can't even understand other people. So to say that God is something or someone that I can understand makes him less than a person, less than a human being. And I don't want to worship a God that is a human being or less. If I can understand you, if I can get you, then you're not God. But the other thing is, when you try to put God in a box, try to make him something that you can understand, then you apply human standards to him. And that's really dangerous. Because if you can understand God, you make yourself God. And here's what I mean. I've got a person that I used to be very, very close to. A relative of mine, a good friend. He was a pastor. he started spending a lot of time thinking about things like, why do bad things happen to good people? Why does God prohibit us from doing certain things? If God exists and He's all-knowing and all-compassionate, why do kids get cancer? This sort of thinking. And over time, that sort of thinking led him to believe that either God doesn't exist because all these bad things happen, or that if He does exist, God's either not a good, loving God, or that He's an indifferent God that just doesn't care about us. And so he's no longer a pastor. He's no longer a believer. I'm not even sure he's an agnostic. But he's either an agnostic or an atheist. Because he tried to put God in a box. He tried to understand God. And I think that's why God tells us things like, my thoughts are higher than your thoughts and my ways are higher than your ways. And why when Moses asked God for His name, he said, I am what I am. I am who I am. There's not a name that can describe me. You don't get to put me in a box. You can't understand me. So, when you're thinking about God, make sure that you understand your thinking isn't big enough for God. Think about a God that is so big that you can't possibly understand Him.